Please don't hurt us. We didn't do anything wrong. 7-year-old Emma Martinez pressed herself against the living room wall, tears streaming down her face, as she tried to shield her 4-year-old brother Miguel behind her small body. The two children trembled as 3 men in expensive suits ransacked their modest apartment, overturning furniture and throwing their belongings across the room. "Where is he?" the largest man, Vincent Kane, demanded as he grabbed Emma by the shoulders. "Where's your father?" I don't know," Emma sobbed. "He's at work. He's always at work. Please don't hurt my brother." Vincent's cold eyes narrowed. He was the enforcer for the Rossini crime family, and he'd been sent to collect a debt that Carlos Martinez supposedly owed them. A debt of $2 million. What Vincent didn't know was that Carlos Martinez wasn't the small-time construction worker they thought he was. "Boss says your daddy borrowed money from us." Vincent snarled, his grip tightening on Emma's thin arms. $2 million. Money he ain't paid back. "My daddy doesn't have that much money," Emma whispered. "We live in a tiny apartment. We eat mac and cheese every night. Please, mister, you're hurting me." Vincent's partner, Tony, was tearing apart the kitchen cabinets. "There's nothing here, Vinny. This place is a dump. Guy's broke as a joke." "Then where's our money?" Vincent shouted, his anger escalating. "Boss, don't make mistakes. Carlos Martinez owes us $2 million, and we're gonna collect one way or another." Little Miguel started crying louder, clutching his sister's leg.
"Emma, I'm scared."
"Where's Poppy?" "Shut that kid up." Vincent snapped at his third associate, Danny, who was standing guard by the door. "Look, maybe we got the wrong guy," Danny said nervously. "Look at this place. Look at these kids. This ain't the house of someone who has access to $2 million. You questioning the boss?" Vincent's voice turned dangerous. "No, I'm just saying. I'm saying we wait here until Daddy comes home, and then we have a nice conversation about his debt. And if he can't pay," Vincent looked meaningfully at the children, "maybe we take some collateral." Emma's sobs grew louder. At 7 years old, she didn't understand what collateral meant, but she understood the threat in the man's voice. "Please," she begged. "My daddy works really hard. He has 3 jobs. He's a good man. He wouldn't steal from anyone." Vincent laughed coldly. "Sweet kid, but your daddy ain't the saint you think he is." What Vincent didn't know was that he'd made a catastrophic error. There were indeed 2 Carlos Martinez in the city. One was a small-time construction worker struggling to support his family. That was Emma and Miguel's father. The other Carlos Martinez was Carlos Eduardo Martinez, a billionaire tech entrepreneur who went by his middle name Eduardo in business circles. Eduardo Martinez was the one who owed the Rossini family money from a failed business deal gone bad. But the Rossini family's intelligence had been sloppy. They'd found the wrong Carlos Martinez, and they were about to discover just how wrong they were. At that moment, 20 miles across the city, Eduardo Martinez was finishing up a board meeting at Martinez Tech Industries, the company he'd built from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. Eduardo had grown up in the same poor neighborhood where Emma and Miguel lived. He'd clawed his way out of poverty through intelligence, determination, and ruthless business acumen. But he'd never forgotten where he came from, and he'd never stopped helping families in his old neighborhood. 3 months ago, he'd quietly started paying rent and expenses for struggling families in his former community, including a construction worker named Carlos Martinez who had the same name as him, a man with 2 young children who reminded Eduardo of his own childhood. Eduardo had been anonymously supporting the Martinez family, making sure their rent was paid and their children had food and clothes. He'd even arranged for the father to get additional construction work through his company's building projects. But he'd kept his involvement secret, not wanting to embarrass the proud working man by making him feel like a charity case. Now, as Eduardo's assistant handed him his phone, he saw 17 missed calls from his security team. "Sir, His head of security, Marcus, said urgently when Eduardo called back. We have a problem. The Rossini family has made contact. Eduardo's blood ran cold. The Rossinis were the reason he'd tripled his security in recent months. He'd gotten involved with them in a legitimate business deal that had gone south, and now they were demanding compensation that Eduardo refused to pay on principle. What kind of contact? They grabbed the wrong Carlos Martinez, sir. They went after the construction worker, the one you've been helping. They're holding his children. Eduardo's phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the conference table. The children. The sweet little girl with the bright smile who reminded him of his sister. The little boy who waved at him from the window when he'd driven through the neighborhood. Get my car, Eduardo said, his voice deadly quiet. Get every man we have. And call the police. No, call Commissioner Rodriguez directly. Tell him it's an emergency. Sir, maybe we should. Now, Eduardo roared, his billionaire composure cracking entirely. Those children are in danger because of me. Because those animals can't tell the difference between a construction worker and a tech CEO. Back at the apartment, Vincent was growing impatient. It was getting dark, and Carlos still hadn't come home from his evening job. Maybe we should just take the kids, Danny suggested nervously. Leave a message for Daddy that way.
No. Emma screamed, pulling Miguel closer.
Please don't take us away from our daddy. He needs us. We're all he has. Your daddy should have thought about that before he stole from my boss, Vincent said coldly. He didn't steal anything, Emma cried. My daddy is good. He works construction and he fixes cars and he cleans offices at night so we can have food. He doesn't steal. Something in the little girl's desperate honesty made Danny uncomfortable. Vinny, I'm telling you, I think we got the wrong guy. Look at this place. Look at these kids. Vincent backhanded Danny across the face. I said don't question the boss. That's when they heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. Multiple cars. Expensive cars with powerful engines. What the hell? Tony looked out the window and went pale. Vinny, we got company. Big company. Below, a convoy of black SUVs had surrounded the apartment building. Men in tactical gear were taking positions around the perimeter. And walking up the front steps, flanked by a security team, was a man in an expensive suit who moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. Eduardo Martinez had arrived, and he was furious. The apartment door exploded inward as Eduardo's security team breached it with professional efficiency. Vincent spun around, gun in hand, but found himself facing 6 armed men in tactical vests. Put the weapon down, the lead security officer commanded. Now. But Eduardo stepped past his security team, his eyes blazing with a fury that made Vincent take a step backward. You made a mistake, Eduardo said, his voice low and dangerous. A very, very big mistake. Vincent stared at the man in the expensive suit, confusion mixing with his anger. Who the hell are you? I'm Carlos Martinez, Eduardo replied. The one you're actually looking for. Vincent's face went white as recognition dawned. This wasn't the poor construction worker he'd expected. This was someone important, someone powerful, someone very, very angry. You got the wrong family, Eduardo continued, taking another step forward. These children have nothing to do with our business. Their father has nothing to do with our business. They're innocent. Look, we made an honest mistake. Honest. Eduardo's voice cracked like a whip. You terrorized 2 children. You broke into their home. You threatened to hurt them. Emma, who had been cowering against the wall, looked up at the man who'd burst through the door like an avenging angel. Something about him seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Mister, she whispered, are you going to hurt us too? Eduardo's expression immediately softened as he knelt down to the children's level. No, sweetheart. I'm here to make sure no one ever hurts you again." He looked back at Vincent with murder in his eyes. "You scared these babies. You made them cry. You made them beg for their lives." "We didn't hurt them," Vincent said defensively. "You terrorized them." Eduardo stood back up, his full height and presence commanding the room. "Do you know who I am? You're Carlos Martinez, the tech guy. I'm Eduardo Martinez, CEO of Martinez Tech Industries. I'm worth $3.2 billion. I employ 15,000 people. I have connections in every level of government and law enforcement in this city." Vincent was sweating now, realizing the magnitude of his error. "And these children," Eduardo continued, gesturing to Emma and Miguel, "are under my protection. They have been for months. I've been making sure their family has everything they need because I remember what it's like to be where they are." He stepped closer to Vincent, close enough that the enforcer could smell his expensive cologne and see the deadly seriousness in his eyes. "You want your $2 million? Fine. But you came after the wrong family. You terrified innocent children. And for that, there's going to be consequences. Look, Mr. Martinez, we can work this out." "No," Eduardo said firmly. "We can't. Commissioner Rodriguez is already on his way with a full tactical team. You're going to be arrested for breaking and entering, terrorizing children, and about a dozen other charges I'm going to make sure stick. But the money you'll never see. Not from me, not from anyone. Because when word gets out that the Rossini family attacks children, you'll find that all your business relationships dry up very quickly." Vincent looked around desperately, realizing he was trapped. Eduardo's security team had weapons drawn. Sirens were wailing in the distance, and he just threatened the children of one of the most powerful men in the city. "You can't do this to us," Vincent said weakly. "Watch me," Eduardo replied coldly. As police officers flooded into the apartment, Eduardo turned his attention back to Emma and Miguel, who were still huddled together against the wall. "It's okay now," he said gently, kneeling down again. "You're safe. No one is going to hurt you anymore." "Are you a good guy?" Miguel asked in a small voice. Eduardo smiled for the first time since entering the apartment. "I try to be, little man." "You look familiar," Emma said, studying his face. "Have we met before?" Eduardo hesitated. These children had been through enough trauma for one day. They didn't need to know that the men who'd terrorized them had been looking for him. "Maybe you've seen me around the neighborhood," he said carefully. "I grew up not far from here." As the police led Vincent and his associates away in handcuffs, Eduardo's phone rang. It was Carlos, the real Carlos, Emma and Miguel's father calling from his night job. "Mr. Martinez?" Carlos's voice was panicked. "The police called me. They said something happened to my children." "Are they okay?" "They're fine, Carlos. They're safe. But you need to come home right now." When Carlos Martinez arrived at his apartment 20 minutes later, he found his children sitting on their couch, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot chocolate that Eduardo's assistant had brought from a nearby cafe. Emma and Miguel ran to their father, and Carlos swept them into his arms, tears streaming down his face. "Papi," Emma cried, "bad men came to our house, but the good man saved us." Carlos looked up at Eduardo with confusion and gratitude. "Sir, I don't understand. Who are you? What happened here?" Eduardo took a deep breath. It was time to tell the truth. "My name is Eduardo Martinez. I'm the CEO of Martinez Tech Industries, and I'm the reason those men came to your apartment tonight." Carlos's face went pale. "I don't understand. The men who broke in here tonight were looking for me. I owe money to some very bad people, and they got confused because we have the same name. They came after your family by mistake. But why would they think Because I've been helping your family, Carlos. Anonymously. I've been making sure your rent gets paid, that your children have what they need. I grew up in this neighborhood, and I wanted to give back. But I kept it secret because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." Carlos stared at him, pieces falling into place. The mysterious rent payments, the extra construction work, the food deliveries that Emma said came from the nice man. You're the one who's been helping us?" "I am, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that my problems put your children in danger." Carlos was quiet for a long moment, holding his children close. Then he looked up at Eduardo with dignity and strength that reminded Eduardo of his own father. "Mr. Martinez, I'm grateful for your help, more grateful than you know. But my children could have been hurt tonight because of my connection to you. I know, and I take full responsibility for that. What are you going to do to make sure it never happens again?" Eduardo had been dreading this question, but he'd already made his decision. "I'm moving your family, tonight, to a safe location where the Rossini family will never find you. And I'm giving you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You can disappear. I'll give you enough money to relocate anywhere in the country, start fresh, make sure your children are safe and provided for. Or what? Or you can let me hire the best security team in the world to protect your family while I finish dealing with the Rossinis permanently. Either way, your children will never be in danger because of me again." Carlos looked down at Emma and Miguel, who were listening to every word. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "the nice man saved us from the bad men, and he's been taking care of us all this time." "I like him, Papi," Miguel added. "He has kind eyes like you do." Carlos studied Eduardo's face, seeing something there that he recognized. The look of a man who understood what it meant to protect children, to sacrifice for family, to do whatever it took to keep the people you loved safe. "If we stay," Carlos said slowly, "and let you protect us, what does that mean? It means I'm going to end the threat permanently. The Rossini family operates on fear and intimidation, but they've never gone up against someone with my resources. I'm going to make it clear to them, and to anyone else who might threaten innocent families, that there are consequences for targeting children. And if we go, then you disappear completely. New identities, new city, trust fund for the children's education, house paid for, everything you need to start over safely." Carlos was quiet for a long time, weighing the options. Stay and trust this powerful stranger to protect them, or flee and abandon everything they'd ever known. "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on his shirt, "I don't want to leave our home. This is where Mommy used to live with us." Carlos's wife, Emma and Miguel's mother, had died 2 years earlier from cancer. This apartment was full of her memories, her presence, their life together as a family. "I don't want to leave either, Mija," Carlos said softly. He looked back at Eduardo. "If we stay, can you promise me that my children will be safe? I can promise you that I will use every resource at my disposal to protect them. And I can promise you that the Rossini family will never be a threat to anyone ever again." "How can you be so sure?" Eduardo smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Because they just made the mistake of threatening children under my protection. And I don't forgive. And I don't forget." Over the next week, Eduardo Martinez systematically dismantled the Rossini crime family's operations. Using his connections in law enforcement, federal agencies, and financial institutions, he provided evidence of every crime they'd committed over the past decade. Using his business network, he cut off their legitimate revenue streams. Using his political influence, he ensured that every level of government was aware of their activities. Most importantly, he made it clear to every criminal organization in the city that attacking innocent families, especially children, would result in the full weight of his empire being brought down on them. The message was received loud and clear. But Eduardo didn't stop there. He hired the best security team money could buy to protect the Martinez family. He set up college funds for Emma and Miguel. He offered Carlos a management position at one of his construction subsidiaries, with full benefits and a salary that would ensure the family never struggled again. Most importantly, he became part of their lives, not as a distant benefactor, but as someone who genuinely cared about their well-being. 6 months later, Emma's birthday party was held in the community center that Eduardo had built in the neighborhood. The party was attended by dozens of local families that Eduardo now supported through jobs, scholarships, and community programs. But the moment Eduardo treasured most was when Emma ran up to him with a drawing she'd made. "Look, Mr. Eduardo, I drew our family." The drawing showed stick figures holding hands, a tall man labeled Papi, a little girl labeled Emma, a little boy labeled Miguel, and another tall figure labeled Mr. Eduardo, our guardian angel. "You put me in your family picture?" Eduardo asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course. You're part of our family now. You saved us, and you take care of us, and you love us. That makes you family." Eduardo knelt down and hugged the little girl who had changed his entire understanding of what wealth was really for. "Emma, you and Miguel and your father, you saved me too." "How did we save you?" "You reminded me that money is only worth something if you use it to protect the people you love." That night, after the party, Eduardo sat with Carlos on the steps of the community center, watching Emma and Miguel play with the other neighborhood children. "Any regrets?" Carlos asked. "About all this, taking on the Rossinis, getting involved with our family, changing your whole life." Eduardo watched Emma teaching a younger child how to draw. Her face lit up with joy and kindness despite everything she'd been through. "Just one regret," he said. "What's that?" "That I waited so long to figure out what really mattered." Carlos nodded, understanding completely. "Emma asks me every night if you're really going to stay, if you're really going to keep being part of our family." "What do you tell her?" "I tell her that some angels are permanent assignments." Eduardo smiled, feeling more at peace than he'd ever felt in his entire life. "You know what the funny tea? That's because real security doesn't come from what you own," Carlos said wisely. "It comes from knowing that you belong somewhere, that you matter to people who matter to you." Eduardo looked at the drawing Emma had given him, now framed and sitting in his office where he could see it every day. "Those men came to hurt your family because they thought I was someone I wasn't," he said. "But protecting your family made me into someone I never thought I could be." "And what's that?" "A father, a protector, someone who uses his power for the right reasons." As the evening wound down and it was time to take the children home, Emma ran up to Eduardo one more time. "Mr. Eduardo, will you read us a bedtime story tonight?" "Of course, Mija. And will you stay until we fall asleep?" "I'll stay as long as you need me to. Forever." Eduardo looked at this brave little girl who had sobbed and begged, "Don't hurt us," just 6 months ago, who now felt safe enough to ask him to stay forever. "Forever," he promised. And as they walked home together, Carlos, Eduardo, Emma, and Miguel, Eduardo realized that the day those criminals had broken into the wrong apartment had actually been the luckiest day of his life, because it had led him to discover that the most valuable thing a billionaire could buy wasn't another company or another house or another toy. The most valuable thing money could buy was the chance to be someone's hero, to stand between danger and innocence, to be the person who shows up when children are scared and crying and begging not to be hurt, to be family to people who need family. That was worth more than all the money in the world. And Emma's drawing, hanging in his office, reminded him every single day that he'd finally found the most profitable investment he'd ever made: love. What did you think of Eduardo's transformation from distant billionaire to protective family member? Have you ever had someone step up to protect you when you needed it most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if the story moved you, please share it with others who might need to hear this message about what real wealth and security actually mean.